Hello to everyone, thank you for having me here today. I'm Thomas Bertani, I'm the CEO of Oraclize. We are a small cybersecurity startup, 10 people, based in London. I think during the previous presentation we have been mentioned a few times because there are some projects that are based on our service already. So I will start off the presentation with something weird. So basically, this was one of our first slides around 2 years ago when we went around presenting our service. And basically what happened back then, it was October 2015, is that, well, we won the London FinTech Week. It wasn't an Oraclize project, but half of the team was from our company. And basically what we did was proposing a flight delay insurance written in Solidity on Ethereum. And this was the first project winning the London FinTech Week hackathon in 2015. So Ethereum mainnet came out like 3 months before or something like that. This was very interesting for us, so we started going around and saying to people, look, we can disrupt everything here. So we can automate a process which looked like this, we can remove paperwork, we can automate the payout process, and basically this is what Etherisc today is doing in a much better way than what we did back then, right? Then we figured out that, well, we stopped and we said, oh, wait a minute, but we are all tech guys. We don't really know anything about insurance. So why would we even do that? So this is when we stopped and we decided to keep focusing on our core service. So we threw all of this stuff away. A few months later, we met with the Etherisc guys and we noticed ourselves that, yeah, we were right. And there was a strong need for somebody not just with a technical expertise but also with a background in insurance, which could actually deliver a product which made sense. So we did a step back and we tried to focus on this problem instead, which is what Oraclize started from in February 2015. So basically this is the Oracle problem, and the Oracle problem in the blockchain space is the problem of providing data which come from a different context, like think about the internet, to a blockchain application. So once we have a blockchain application, we have a decentralized architecture, we need to, well, we want to depend on real-world data, right? Think about the flight delayed app itself of Etherisc. So we want to check, for example, if a given flight is late or not, what is the temperature in Cancun, and so on, right? The problem is that on the blockchain we don't have all this data. And it's impossible for very boring technical reasons to just reach out to the internet like we do with traditional architectures. So in traditional architectures, business people don't ever look at this problem because it's something trivial which has a technical solution and is done on a daily basis by developers, which is just figuring out which web API they want, where the data comes from, and then writing that, I don't know, 3 lines of code that fetch the data. This is something that on the blockchain you cannot simply do because in a decentralized architecture it's impossible to find the consensus of what an external data is in a trivial way. This is often called like the walled garden problem as well, in the sense that blockchain applications live like in their own walled garden, they cannot reach out to the internet and blah blah. So these are basically the 3 entities we want to consider. So as you see, we have like the Dapps, the application that needs the data. We have the Oracle, which is a very broad concept, so it's very complicated to define what the Oracle is, but in the end, the Oracle, we can say it's just whoever sends the data to the blockchain application. And then we have the data source, which with most approaches is the same entity as the Oracle. So it means that whoever owns the data, whoever creates the data in the first instance, is the party sending the blockchain. So when Oracle and data source are the same party, then we have basically something like what Thomson Reuters does. If you look at Thomson Reuters, they have an integration with the blockchain. So if you need financial data on Ethereum, you can just use the Thomson Reuters APIs, and in that case, the data source, Thomson Reuters, is the Oracle, and they provide the data to the blockchain. But in most cases, what you want is a data source which is not integrated to the blockchain to provide data there. And unfortunately, this is a problem that has been ignored for a while, in the sense that people say, developers, mostly developers say, okay, but we need data maybe from, I don't know, for the temperature from Wolfram Alpha or whatever data source. We will go there for reasons. They will like the blockchain and they will start integrating there. Okay, this never happened, and it will likely never happen, or not anytime soon, also because we have to consider that there are many different blockchains. Of course, we all like Ethereum, we are here for that reason, but there are many different communities, different needs, and different deployments also of Ethereum itself. It's not just Ethereum mainnet. So, it's very complicated to convince the data source to integrate with the blockchain where our application is running. And this is why when we started approaching the problem, we figured out that it wasn't really needed for the data source to be the Oracle. So we started separating the two things and saying, okay, we have a solution for connecting existing data sources, like any provider of data that does it already via their own means, like web APIs, most of the times, to applications on the blockchain. So we want to do the boring connection and to adapt all the data sources to the blockchain applications. And this is what we are today. So basically, this is a bit ironic maybe, but we are a new intermediary in a world which is trying to get rid of intermediaries. But as you will figure out during the presentation, I hope that it will make sense to you as well. Because intermediaries, when we talk about blockchain, is often something malicious or that we want to get rid of. But in that case, we believe that it makes sense, and it is actually something which should be considered a part of the architecture. It's something which could make the security guarantees of the blockchain and the dependency on data much stronger and safer. So basically, Oraclize today is saying something very simple, which is, regardless of our personal opinions, we want to integrate any blockchain or any context with any data source. So we want to stay agnostic and just be here. So we want to connect like Ethereum, Bitcoin, public blockchains, private blockchains, whatever. If it doesn't make sense, it's not our problem, it's the problem of whoever writes the applications there. But we want to connect the internet, the traditional internet, with all these new architectures and contexts that people are bootstrapping today. While doing that, again, we become intermediaries, and intermediaries are a party that we need to trust, right? Because once we decide we want to be here, the application running on Ethereum will get the data from us. So the data will come from Oraclize in that case, and not from the third party, at least from a technical perspective. So you will see a transaction, let's say, coming from Oraclize, claiming that the data we are sending is the one of the data source. But why would you trust us that we are delivering the correct data? So this is what we had to figure out, because of course it doesn't make any sense to be an intermediary if all the trust has to stay on us, because we are just a small startup of 10 people. So if there is a smart contract with $100 million, depending on our claim, well, it might be complicated to tell to the community, trust us, we're good people. So this is why we invented the concept of authenticity proofs. So authenticity proofs by itself is a very general concept. It just means that we want to prove that the data we deliver to the blockchain is authentic. It's not, a claim around the quality of the data. We don't want to say anything around quality of data. We often receive emails, we stop answering to most of them, asking to which data source our clients should choose. So basically, people writing application come to us saying, who should I trust? Well, you shouldn't ask us, right? So you should figure out yourself in a blockchain context who is a provider of data that you consider trustworthy. And if there is no answer to this, then you need to figure out a collection of providers of data that, when put together, you consider trustworthy. If there is no solution, then maybe you cannot achieve what you want, or this is not the correct architecture to do it. So what Oraclize does, again, is trying just to be this proxy, this carrier for data transport layer. You can call it in any way you like. But the idea is that we move around data which exists already and is provided by data sources on the internet to blockchain applications, while proving that this data is authentic. Proving that it's authentic is very simple in the sense that it's just collection of data. It's not just a signature. It's a collection of data, of information that you need to verify that our data fetching that we did, off-chain, doing the HTTPS request to the web API you want or whatever, is done in a proper way. So we need to prove that there was a secure channel when communicating with the external data source, and we need to prove to the smart contract or to whoever receives the data that we did this request correctly, so that we are not tampering with the data and that the data is authentic indeed. This is trivial in this case, which is when the data source signs the data. Unfortunately, this is a fantasy of cryptographers and developers in the sense that 99.9% of web APIs don't do it and don't really care. This might change in the future. There are many proposals that are being discussed to do it. We are all looking forward to get this more widespread and adopted, but the reality today is that this is not being done. So we need to find an alternative solution to prove that the data is indeed authentic. So when the data source signs the data, it's enough to verify the signature because we know what the public key of the data source is, so you just verify the signature and that's it. But in the other cases, we need to prove that the connection was safe, and we do it with some sandboxing techniques. So basically, we prove that the piece of code we use to get the data is executed in a context that we cannot alter, we cannot tamper, basically. This is done by different techniques. I don't go into too much technical details, not to bore too much the non-developers, but if some developer have questions, feel free to ask or ask me afterwards. Also, in our documentation, there is a better explanation of some of those concepts. The idea is that we can either use software-backed sandboxing techniques, which is this case. So this is TLS Notary today. So TLS Notary is a project that already existed. So this is not something that Oraclize invented, but we are using it to prove that the connection was safe. There are also some other techniques based on hardware installation, on sandboxing that are, executed in a different context, like Etherisc, Time project, or Samsung Knox, the Ledger Nano S, and other techniques. So these are all technical solutions to prove that a piece of code was executed as intended on a given processor. What is important to acknowledge is that when we use these techniques, we are always trusting somebody. It's not Oraclize here. So Oraclize is distributing these proofs to avoid the existence of the trust line with Oraclize. So we want to show to our clients, to calling contracts in the Ethereum case, that we are not tampering with the data. So we want to move the trust away from Oraclize to somebody else. But there is always some trust involved, not just in data source, because of course the data source you trust anyway, but with the provider of the technology. So here, when we look at Etherisc, when we look at Ledger Nano S, Android Safety Net, all these different techniques, that we are studying or using already, there is always somebody backing them, and somebody that, at the end of the day, can tamper with the execution. So in the Etherisc notary case, it is Amazon, safety net is Google, Android proof is Qualcomm. On the Ledger proof, on the Ledger Nano S, you need to trust Ledger, right? Because they are the ones distributing the chip. They are the ones claiming the architecture is safe, but not 100% of it is safe, is open source, so you cannot verify it. In the Intel SGX case, the attestation, the remote service certifying that the piece of code was executed correctly, is again a claim coming from Intel. So there are many pieces which, well, can potentially go wrong. There are attack vectors, and you really need to trust those attestators. So we call attestator whoever is holding the open trust line in argument technology. This slide is quite complicated. I don't want to dive into this now because it's not the objective of this talk. But if you think about what is written here, you will figure out that it doesn't make sense to go to Amazon and ask them to run an Oracle service on the blockchain. It's really something stupid. You don't need the blockchain in the first place if you do that. Same with any other provider, right? Attestator. And even if they all come together in a consortium, it's even worse. Because basically, if they do, you can simplify the process a lot. So you can just say, okay, let's pick all the most trustworthy companies on earth, on the IT sector, and let's ask them to sign data on the blockchain. Okay, first they need to care. Okay, once we figure out to set up a consortium, we will also notice that the idea in principle was broken, because if they come together in a consortium, it means that there are some agreements and there is a specific intent to cooperate. So if they cooperate, then the claim is much weaker than having independent claims that are not based on a cooperation. So this is why it's important that it's a third party leveraging technologies provided by them that does it. It's much stronger chain of proofs. So basically what Oraclize is trying to do today is saying, okay, all these technologies exist out there, they are very complicated to use, they are very new. It's complicated to abstract them out, so we put all of them in the same box and we use the security guarantees they provide to make the providing of data on the blockchain safer. So basically this is what really Oraclize is. This is called the Oraclize engine machine, and this is what is powering our infrastructure. So this is something we manage in principle today. So once you use the Oraclize service on the mainnet, this is what's going on in the backend, if you want. But still, this is a distributed network, but it's managed by us. So given the proofs we send, we cannot tamper with the data, but we can stop answering. So if, for example, I don't know, the police comes to us saying this contract on Ethereum is illegal, you should not send them any transaction back. Okay, this is a bit futuristic, but in case it happens, basically as a company we are forced not to give an answer. But if we do answer, then you can verify yourself that the proof is indeed authentic, is passing, is valid. So the idea is that in order to avoid the scenario I just mentioned, we are starting to enable third parties, like anybody interested, to run the Oraclize engine independently, so that even if our company disappears or we are forced not to send back an answer or things like that, if somebody really wants to and has an interest, they can just use the machine and send back the exact same thing with the exact same proof. So the idea is that if a given user expects a lot of requests to be handled by Oraclize, they can just get one machine and do it themselves. It's not really important what's running in there, because this is my claim, so this is what I claim is running within the machine, but since the proofs are verifiable, you can check yourself what comes in, what goes out, and that everything is running as expected. So the proofs that we sent are verifiable, some on-chain, well, of course they are verifiable. They are all verifiable off-chain, some are verifiable on-chain, so the new ones we have designed do. And as you will see later in one of the last slides, in 3 days, day 3 of DevCon 3, I will be speaking about the proof shield, which is something we have designed during the last year, which enables the on-chain verification of any proof in a very cheap way. This is an example contract, since there are many developers. If some of you have never tried Oraclize, this is the way you do it. So let's say you need a price feed, or you need to check the status of a given flight, whatever. You just call out to Oraclize saying, I want you to use this web API, provide me the data and an evidence, a proof, showing that the data is coming from there. You choose which proof you want. So here, for example, you say, I want TLS notary, I want NPFS, and blah, blah. And then we send back the answer, the result, and the proof itself. Something else which I think is worth mentioning, I've seen also in some presentation that it was mentioned as one of the problems, is the fact that once we deal with complex Dapps, think about complex insurance applications on the blockchain, there might be the need for some complex calculations, which running on the blockchain is very expensive. And most of the times it's stupid. I mean, yeah, you can do that, but doing it on a private blockchain because it's cheaper is not really the solution to the problem. So the problems we want to solve, basically, the limitations of the blockchain we are mentioning for that specific problem are floating point arithmetics, which is not really doable, which in order to get a lot of precision and so on we need. Gas limits, simply, as simple as that. Like, as soon as the policy logic becomes complicated, the costs go up a lot. And it becomes very expensive and it affects the whole logic. We can't really use existing libraries. So if there are some mature libraries that we want to use, we cannot do that because they are not written for Solidity, of course. Also, we have no confidentiality, privacy, scalability is complicated in principle for any decentralized network. For confidentiality, we have seen some people, like Consensus, are pushing a lot on a quorum as a possible solution. But in general, with most blockchains, you have a problem of confidentiality and privacy today, at least. There are some solutions, but they are not really here today. So what we want is a way to overcome this limitation. Possibly, we want the system to be scalable and cost-effective and blah, blah. So basically what we want is not to add smart contracts. We just want to move, this is the exaggeration of the concept. So we want just to move the complexity of chain, but be able to verify it on chain, right? And this is what state channels, payment channels for payments specifically and so on are trying to do. So this is the way we scale the blockchain. But in general today, on Ethereum, we have almost everything in Solidity. So we have huge smart contracts that have to execute all the logic, which is quite prohibitive. Or the alternative that many people are doing today is just saying, okay, this is a proof of concept, we don't care about security, so we say that this piece of code is executed off-chain, we assume it is trusted, and that's it. Okay, then you didn't need the blockchain. But in general, there is not really a solution today. This is one that we proposed last year at DevCon 2, and that is being used today by some enterprises, some smart contracts on Ethereum and so on. We didn't push a lot for it because we wanted to see what people, how people were using it first. So we got some very good feedback during the first year. The idea is to leverage the same concept of insulation that we use for proving the authenticity of data, and do it for the execution of any piece of code in an off-chain context. So the idea is again saying, let's pick a process which is defined by an algorithm, by a piece of code. Let's execute it in a provably insulated sandbox environment, and let's prove just that the execution was done correctly there. It's not the security guarantee of the blockchain. It is definitely not. It's something completely different. It's a different trust model, but it is very scalable. It works today, and most people don't really care. If you go to enterprises, again, the blockchain is innovation, PR, and a solution for all their security problems. Oh, wait a minute. Security is not just blockchain, right? So this is a different way to achieve some of what they were trying to achieve. It's not the security guarantee of the blockchain. It's not everything is not transparent here, but in most cases, you don't even want transparency, you just want privacy, right? So it depends on what you want to achieve, but in some cases, especially when you can't execute it on the blockchain, this is a possible alternative which makes sense. So think about non-deterministic processes like randomness, which is involved in some financial libraries and some processes, or the use of traditional financial libraries, or even just, figuring out some complicated, arguments or parameters for our insurance policy. So this is something that we need, and something that today is mostly trusted or very expensive, or simplified just because we have to do it in Solidity somehow. So the idea is that you write your smart contract in Solidity. You enable the interaction of people with it, of course, and then the smart contract needs the output of some complex calculation. At that point, what happens is that the smart contract does reference a piece of code which is off-chain, so it can be any piece of code. It just specifies basically the hash of the code to be executed, and then Oraclize will get the code in a specific way. It will execute it in a probably fully locked down environment just once. So this is scalable because it's not decentralized. And it will send back to the smart contract the result and the proof of execution. The proof doesn't show all the interim steps. It just shows that that specific code was executed in a probably full lockdown environment, and this is the final result. Then the smart contract can do whatever it wants. There is a deep dive on this specific topic, so the auditable computation data source, on the breakout of day 4, D1Conf 3, if some of you is interested. So this is not in the main hall, it's in the breakout hall. I will show you now, in the last few minutes, some projects that are based on Oraclize. This is not very interesting as a slide here, but it's important to acknowledge that on the Ethereum mainnet, most of the contracts today, which are not just moving value from one exchange to the other, are basically gambling. So to no surprise, the many contracts are using Oraclize for that specific reason on the Ethereum mainnet. In the private chain, there are many more interesting things going on. Like derivatives and other stuff. This is something that I will briefly mention for 30 seconds because it was mentioned before as a problem, and it is quite interesting. So everybody is trying to do Sterling-backed tokens on Ethereum. We already have Tether, which does it, right? We are doing, as part of the FCA Sandbox project in the UK, a fiat-backed token in Sterling. This is just a proof of concept at this point, but this is on the Ethereum mainnet, and this is approved by a financial regulator. So it's interesting for that reason, and for sure for insurance, Dapps is a crucial feature to have. In travel insurance, we have already seen something. I know that how many, 70, 80 people, both from the Etherisc Dapps and insurance policy. Welcome to Cancun. So basically, this is one of the projects on the Ethereum mainnet which is using the Oraclize service. just to fetch different information around the likelihood of a given flight to be late, or to check the status of the flight and so on. But in principle, it could be used also to delegate off-chain some parts of the code execution, so that the costs, the gas costs, can move down a lot. So there is a lot of competition now from other Oracle services, which makes sense, and we are looking forward to integrate it. But today, basically on the Ethereum mainnet at least, we are the most widely used service. We are processing every day between 1 and 5,000 queries, transactions, and we have integrations with any chain. So we are looking forward, as always, for the community feedback, and this is what we will do in the coming months. So new integrations, basically new security guarantees, easier integration with testnets, and so on. Again, on day 3 of DevCon 3, we will show the on-chain verification for existing proofs, which I know a lot of people have been looking for years. So I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, thank you.